8 fired inspectors general are suing the Trump administration over what they are calling unlawful and unjustified termination. The lawsuit says the firings violate federal statutes meant to, quote, protect inspectors general from precisely this sort of interference with the discharge of their critical, nonpartisan oversight duties. President Trump fired more than a dozen of the independent watchdogs 4 days into his second term. In her first press conference in her new role, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced a new lawsuit against New York, its Governor Kathy Hochul and others, claiming the state ignored federal immigration laws. CBS News Homeland Security correspondent Nicole Sganga joins me now. Nicole, can you briefly remind us the purpose of the Inspector General and what legal argument they are making in their lawsuit?
Absolutely. Good to be with you, Lindsay. And this is a heavy lawsuit at that, 32 pages. And there's a dual-pronged legal argument here that the administration violated federal law. One, by requiring, the White House to give Congress 30 days notice. And of course, that notice was not given, and also lacking a sort of substantial rationale for firings. The White House saying this was only part of the administration's changing priorities. One notable line in this filing reads, quote, IGs must be watchdogs, not lapdogs. And it goes on to really speak to how this mass firing will have sent a message to IGs across the country that nonpartisanship and truth-telling will not be tolerated. It will have the effect of intimidating the workforce and thus their critical work for the American people. And to remind our viewers of what that critical work is, inspectors general really serve as police of waste, fraud, and abuse at departments across the federal bureaucracy. It's a post-Watergate sort of infrastructure that was stood up after that scandal during the Carter administration that conducts independent investigations and audits of federal spending and operations at so many critical departments. And in this sort of en masse firing that you mentioned on January 24th, just 4 days into the administration, there were a slew of inspectors general fired, including watchdogs of the State Department, the Department of Education, the Pentagon, the VA, and Health and Human Services, among others.
Well, and we know that the IG for USAID was also fired late Tuesday night. This was 1 day after that scathing report of how the Trump administration cuts were impacting USAID. What more do we know about this?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, the same legal recourse does exist for that inspector general, though it remains to be seen if there will be a lawsuit here. What's notable, as you mentioned, is that this firing happened just a day after that scathing watchdog report from Paul Martin. It assessed the impact of the Trump administration's recent degradation, efforts to significantly curtail the mission of USAID, and warning that there's more than $489 million in food assistance at risk of spoilage or diversion after the Trump administration's freeze on aid, also revealing that although the pause in foreign assistance provided waivers for emergency food assistance, some shipments have still been delayed due to miscommunication with staffers and employees, very unclear guidance issued across the USAID workforce. This report really outlined that. And Paul Martin was informed of his dismissal by a very similar two-line email from Trent Morse. He's the deputy director of the White House Office of Presidential Personnel.
Back to that lawsuit against New York that the DOJ just announced. This lawsuit comes almost a week after the DOJ sued Chicago and the state of Illinois for standing in the way of the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. What's the legal argument here?
Yeah, we're still waiting on the actual lawsuit to drop here, Lindsay, but the U.S. Attorney General in her first press conference says she's suing New York State officials over what she calls failures to enforce immigration law. And the lawsuit specifically names the New York governor, Kathy Hochul, the Attorney General, Letitia James, and the state's head of the DMV, Mark Schroeder. The legal argument based on this press conference appears to take aim at a green light law that allows people who are living in New York State, even in New York State illegally, to obtain driver's licenses. Bondi told reporters that the law also limits New York's ability to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement, with ICE immigration enforcement there in the state. And this is really, as you mentioned, just the latest move in a string of moves that the Department of Justice has had in sort of putting forth and supporting the president's immigration agenda. Just last week, they also sued Chicago and the state of Illinois, claiming that sanctuary laws in place there undercut the U.S. Constitution. Lindsay.
Nicole Sganga, we covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much.
Thank you.